The first ships appeared on a Tuesday morning. They came from nowhere, dropping out of empty space like silver tears falling from heaven. Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his third cup of coffee when the alarm started screaming across the Pacific Fleet Command Center. "Sir, we have contacts," his radar operator called out. Multiple bogies, appearing all over the globe. Jake set down his mug and walked to the main screen. What he saw made his blood run cold. Hundreds of crystalline vessels hung in Earth's atmosphere, each one the size of a city block. They looked like giant diamonds carved by an artist's hand, catching sunlight and throwing it back in rainbow patterns. "Beautiful," someone whispered. Jake grabbed his radio. "All stations, this is Pacific Command. We have unknown vessels in our airspace. Scramble all fighters." Repeat, scramble all fighters. The response came fast. "Too fast. Command, this is Viper Squadron. We're having trouble. Something's wrong with my head. I can't think straight." Jake felt it then. A pressure behind his eyes, like fingers made of ice pushing into his brain. Fear crashed over him in waves. Not his fear. Someone else's fear, cold and alien and wrong. Around the command center, people started falling. First, a young lieutenant at the communications desk. She grabbed her head and screamed, then collapsed. Then the weapons officer, a tough Marine who had survived 3 wars. He dropped to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "Sir," his second-in-command gasped. "It's in my head. They're in my head." Jake tried to fight it, but the alien presence pushed deeper. Images flooded his mind. Pictures of burning cities, Earth covered in glass towers, humans working in chains while crystal beings watched from above. The fear was so strong, it felt like drowning. "All units," he tried to say, but his voice came out as a whisper. "All units, fall back. Fall back," and the words died in his throat. Something vast and cold touched his mind, and Jake Morrison, defender of Earth's oceans, fell to his knees and wept like a child. Across the globe, the same scene played out again and again. In Moscow, General Petrov tried to launch nuclear missiles, but his hands shook so badly he could not press the buttons. In Beijing, Admiral Chun watched her entire fleet surrender without firing a single shot. In Washington, the president went on television to announce Earth's defeat. His words slow and hollow, his eyes empty. The crystalline ships did not fire their weapons. They did not need to. Their crews reached out with minds like bright knives, cutting through human thoughts as easily as scissors through paper. Every military commander felt the same crushing despair. Every soldier experienced the same hopeless terror. Dr. Sarah Chun was in her laboratory when the invasion began. She was studying brain scans, looking for patterns in how different minds worked. The first wave of psychic attack hit her like a hammer, driving her to the floor. But something was different about Sarah's reaction. The fear was there, yes. The crushing weight of alien thoughts pressed down on her mind. But beneath it all, her brain kept working. Years of studying autism spectrum disorders had taught her something the aliens did not expect. Her mind was not like others. It moved in different patterns, thought in different ways. While her research assistant collapsed beside her, Sarah stayed conscious. The alien presence felt confused in her head, like it could not find the right connections to make. Her thoughts scattered and reformed, like a puzzle the invaders could not solve. She crawled to her radio and tried to call for help. But the only voices she heard were surrender announcements and desperate crying. Within 72 hours, it was over. World leaders signed documents of surrender while alien telepaths watched from their crystal ships. The Zephyrian Empire, they called themselves. They had conquered 43 worlds before Earth, always the same way. Their minds were stronger than any other species they had met. Humans were moved into cities designated by their new masters. Work camps were established. Crystal towers grew from the ground like strange plants, each one broadcasting the psychic control that kept humanity docile and afraid. The aliens spoke to human leaders through translators, but their real communication happened mind to mind. They showed images of their vast empire stretching across the galaxy, worlds where other species worked and lived under Zephyrian rule, their thoughts monitored, their rebellions crushed before they could begin. Your species will adapt, the Zephyrian commander told the United Nations Assembly. His physical form was tall and thin, made of what looked like living crystal. When he spoke, his words appeared directly in their minds. All species adapt. You will be useful to us. But in hidden places around the world, some humans were not adapting. Sarah Chun was not alone. In a small apartment in Tokyo, a man with severe ADHD found that his racing thoughts confused the alien monitors. In New York, a woman with autism discovered that her rigid thinking patterns created walls the telepaths could not break through. They did not understand what was happening to them. They only knew that while others accepted defeat, their minds remained partially their own. And in those scattered minds, something dangerous was beginning to grow. Not hope, not yet, but the beginning of an idea that would change everything. The aliens had won the first battle, but they did not understand the human mind as well as they thought they did. 6 months passed under crystal skies. The alien towers hummed with psychic energy that kept most humans calm and compliant. They went to work in the morning, building things they did not understand for masters they could barely remember choosing to serve. At night, they went home and watched entertainment programs that made them forget they had ever been free. But Sarah Chen remembered everything. She had moved 3 times since the invasion, always staying one step ahead of the Zephyrian mind sweeps that hunted for resistance thoughts. Now she lived in an abandoned subway station beneath Chicago, surrounded by computers she had salvaged and data she had collected from around the world. The breakthrough came when she met Marcus Williams. Marcus was 25 years old and had been diagnosed with severe ADHD as a child. Before the invasion, he had worked as a software engineer, struggling with deadlines but brilliant at solving complex problems. When the aliens took control, something strange happened to Marcus. The psychic pressure that made others docile only made his mind race faster. It's like trying to grab water, Marcus told Sarah when they met in a coffee shop that served as a secret meeting place for the underground. Their thoughts come into my head, but mine are moving too fast for them to catch. One minute I'm thinking about resistance plans. The next minute I'm thinking about pizza. Then suddenly I'm remembering a song from when I was 8. They can't follow it. Sarah studied Marcus carefully. She had suspected this might be possible, but having proof changed everything. How many others have you found like us? 17 so far, Marcus said. Mostly people with autism, ADHD, or other neurological differences. We don't all resist the same way, but we all resist something. Sarah opened her notebook. For months, she had been documenting cases like Marcus, a woman with Tourette's syndrome whose tics seemed to scramble psychic signals, a man with schizophrenia whose complex internal world confused alien telepaths, an autistic teenager whose intense focus on specific subjects created mental walls the Zephyrians could not penetrate. We need to find more, Sarah said, and we need to learn how to teach others to think like us. The network grew slowly. They communicated through seemingly random posts on social media platforms. The aliens had not yet learned to monitor properly. A recipe shared here, a music recommendation there, a math problem posted in an obscure forum. To the Zephyrian scanners, it looked like normal human internet noise. but each post contained coded messages that guided neurodivergent individuals to safe meeting places. Dr. Rebecca Torres joined them in month 7. Before the invasion, she had been a therapist specializing in meditation and mindfulness techniques. The aliens had tried to control her mind like all the others, but years of meditation practice had taught her to observe her thoughts without being controlled by them. The key is not fighting the alien presence, Rebecca explained to their growing group. Fighting makes your thoughts focused, predictable. Instead, we need to teach people to let their minds become chaotic on purpose. They began developing training programs in hidden basements and abandoned buildings. Sarah taught volunteers about neurodiversity and how different brains processed information. Marcus showed them computer programming techniques that required rapid shifts in thinking patterns. Rebecca guided them through meditation exercises. Designed to create mental static. The most important discovery came from an unexpected source. Jamie Park was 15 years old and had been struggling with anxiety and depression since childhood. When the aliens invaded, the constant fear in the air actually made Jamie feel more normal, not less. During one of their training sessions, Jamie discovered something remarkable. "I can feel them trying to read my mind," Jamie said. "But when I start thinking about all the things that make me anxious, they pull back. It's like my anxiety creates noise they don't want to deal with." Sarah realized that human emotional complexity was something the Zephyrians had not encountered before. Their empire was built on conquering species with orderly, logical minds. But human minds were wonderfully chaotic, full of contradictions, emotions, and irrational thoughts. They began teaching people to embrace their mental messiances. Volunteers learned to let their thoughts wander randomly during the day. They practiced thinking about multiple things at once. They deliberately confused themselves by trying to solve impossible puzzles or remember dreams that made no sense. The technique worked best on people who had always felt different or struggled with conventional thinking. Former dropouts and misfits became their best recruits. Artists and writers who had lived with creative chaos in their heads found it easy to amplify that chaos. People with mental health challenges learned to weaponize their symptoms. By month 8, they had over 200 active members in 12 cities. They called themselves the Static Network, because their goal was to create so much mental noise that alien telepaths could not function properly. The first real test came when Zephyrian forces conducted a loyalty sweep in downtown Detroit. They gathered citizens in the main square and scanned their minds for traces of rebellious thoughts. Most people passed the test easily, their controlled minds showing nothing but acceptable compliance. But 16 members of the Static Network were in that crowd. Instead of trying to hide their thoughts, they had planned something different. At exactly noon, all 16 began the mental exercise Rebecca had taught them. They let their minds fill with streams of consciousness that jumped from topic to topic without logic or reason. One thought about childhood, birthday parties while doing complex math in her head. Another remembered every song lyric she had ever heard while simultaneously trying to visualize impossible geometric shapes. A third focused on the taste of ice cream while listing every person she had ever met. The Zephyrian scanner reading their minds stumbled. For a moment, its mental probe recoiled in confusion. Then it tried again, pushing deeper, trying to find the orderly thoughts it expected from human minds. Instead, it found beautiful chaos. 16 human minds thinking about everything and nothing, following patterns that made no sense, full of emotions and memories and random ideas that crashed into each other like waves in a storm. The scanner retreated. For the first time since the invasion began, a Zephyrian psychic probe had failed to control human minds. Word of the success spread through their network in coded messages. In other cities, Static network members began testing their techniques in smaller groups. They learned to create mental noise that confused alien monitors. They discovered that working together, their chaotic thoughts became even more effective. But the Zephyrians were learning too. They began hunting for the source of the mental interference. Patrols increased in areas where their psychic readings showed anomalies. The war was about to enter a new phase, one that would be fought not with weapons, but with the power of human imagination itself. Asterisk. The counterattack began in month 10. Zephyrian forces had finally realized that something was interfering with their psychic control systems. Crystal ships started conducting deep scans of human population centers, looking for the source of the mental static that was spreading like a virus through their carefully controlled cities. Sarah Chun knew they were running out of time. The static network had grown to nearly 1,000 members across 15 countries, but they were still hiding in the shadows, training people one small group at a time. It was not enough. They needed something bigger. "We need to go on the offensive," Marcus said, during an emergency meeting in an abandoned warehouse outside Mumbai. Representatives from network cells around the world had gathered using encrypted quantum communications that looked like video game traffic to alien scanners. Dr. Torres agreed. "Our defensive techniques are working, but we're not really fighting back. We're just making ourselves harder to control. What if we could actually attack their systems?" The idea seemed impossible at first. The Zephyrian psychic network was vast and powerful, connected to crystal amplifiers in hundreds of ships and thousands of ground stations. How could a handful of chaotic human minds fight something like that? The answer came from the most unlikely source. 8-year-old Tommy Rodriguez had been brought to one of their safe houses by his older sister. Tommy was autistic and had always been fascinated by patterns and numbers. While the adults talked about resistance strategies, Tommy played with building blocks in the corner. "The crystals make music," Tommy announced suddenly. Everyone stopped talking and looked at him. Tommy was arranging his blocks in complex geometric patterns, his face serious and focused. "What do you mean, honey?" Sarah asked, kneeling down beside him. "Their thoughts make music," Tommy explained. "Like a big song with lots of parts. But some parts are wrong. They don't fit." Sarah felt her heart racing. "Can you show me?" Tommy began moving his blocks around, creating structures that seemed random but felt somehow meaningful. As Sarah watched, she began to understand what the boy was seeing. The Zephyrian psychic network was not just a communication system. It was a vast, complex harmony of alien minds working together, and every harmony had weak points where the notes did not quite match. "Tommy," Sarah said carefully, "do you think you could find the wrong notes? The places where their song breaks?" Tommy nodded seriously. "I can see them. There and there and there." He pointed to different parts of his block pattern. "If you sing loud enough in the wrong places, the whole song gets confused." The plan that emerged from that conversation was ambitious and dangerous. They called it Operation Brainstorm. Instead of just creating random mental noise, they would coordinate their chaos. If Tommy was right about the weak points in the alien network, they could amplify their psychological attacks and target the most vulnerable nodes. They spent 6 weeks preparing. The static network expanded rapidly as word spread through underground channels. People who had never been involved in resistance activities began learning the mental exercises that would let them join the assault. Artists and musicians were especially effective recruits. Their minds were already trained to think in patterns that mixed logic and creativity in unexpected ways. The network developed new techniques for psychological warfare. They learned to broadcast specific types of mental chaos designed to overload different kinds of alien receivers. Mathematical paradoxes that crashed logical processing systems. Emotional memories so intense they caused psychic feedback loops. Streams of consciousness that changed direction so quickly that telepathic probes could not follow them. But the most powerful weapon they developed was something uniquely human. Collaborative imagination, working in groups of 12 to 20 people. Network members learned to share chaotic thoughts while maintaining individual mental signatures. They would start with one person thinking about something impossible, like a color that did not exist. Then the next person would add to that thought, imagining the sound the color would make. A third person would describe what that sound would taste like. And so on, building shared hallucinations that became more complex and irrational with each addition. The result was psychic noise that the Zephyrian scanners had never encountered before. Multiple human minds working together to create something that was neither logical nor completely random, but beautifully, chaotically creative. By month 11, they were ready to test their new tactics. The target was a Zephyrian communication hub in São Paulo, Brazil. The Crystal Tower stood 8 stories tall in what had once been the city's center, broadcasting psychic control signals to keep the local population compliant. 53 static network members positioned themselves at strategic points around the tower. At exactly 3 a.m. local time, when alien psychic activity was at its lowest, they began their coordinated attack. The assault started quietly. Each person began thinking about butterflies, but not normal butterflies. These were butterflies made of light that sang opera while performing complex mathematical calculations. As the image took shape in their minds, they began adding impossible details. Butterflies that existed in 17 dimensions. Butterflies that could taste the color of sound. Butterflies that remembered the future and forgot the past. Asterisk. The shared hallucination grew more elaborate by the minute. Soon, 53 human minds were collaborating on a fantasy so complex and irrational that it generated massive amounts of psychic interference. The Crystal Tower's harmonics began to fluctuate as its receivers tried to process the chaotic signals. Then Phase 2 began. Instead of just thinking about impossible butterflies, the network members started thinking about impossible butterflies, thinking about impossible butterflies. They created recursive loops of imagination that spiraled into infinite regression. Each butterfly in their shared vision began having its own impossible thoughts about other impossible butterflies having impossible thoughts. The psychic feedback was immediate and devastating. The Crystal Tower's harmonic frequency spiked wildly as its processing systems overloaded. Warning lights flashed along its surface. The Zephyrian technicians inside the tower stumbled and fell as their mental connection to the network was severed. For 47 minutes, the tower was completely offline. 50,000 humans in the surrounding area suddenly felt the psychic pressure lift from their minds. For the first time in almost a year, they could think their own thoughts without alien interference. The victory was temporary. Backup systems came online and restored partial control within an hour. But the message was clear. The static network had proved that human minds, working together, could attack and damage the Zephyrian psychic infrastructure. More importantly, they had discovered something the aliens did not know about themselves. The Zephyrian network was built for efficiency and logic. It could handle massive amounts of organized information and coordinate the thoughts of billions of alien minds across their empire. But it was not designed to process the beautiful madness of human creativity. When faced with imagination that was truly chaotic, truly collaborative, and truly human, the network choked on its own inability to comprehend what it was trying to analyze. The real war was about to begin. And for the first time since the invasion started, humans had a weapon that could hurt their enemies. The final battle began on a Monday morning in March. Exactly 1 year after the first crystal ships appeared in Earth's skies. But this time, humans were ready. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled 43 worlds before Earth, and their pattern was always the same. psychic domination, followed by gradual integration into their crystalline society. Species that resisted were crushed within months. Species that adapted became useful parts of the Empire's expansion machine. But Earth was different. For 12 months, the static network had been growing and evolving. What started as a few dozen neurodivergent individuals had become a global movement of over 50,000 active members. They had learned to weaponize the very thing that made them human: their magnificent, chaotic creativity. Supreme Commander Zeftal studied the reports from his flagship above Earth's northern pole. The psychic interference was spreading faster than his technicians could compensate. Entire communication hubs were going offline for hours at a time. Human compliance rates were dropping in every major population center. How many of them are involved in this resistance? He asked his intelligence chief. We estimate between 50 and 70,000 actively participating, came the crystalline reply. But the effect is spreading to others who have not been trained. The mental chaos appears to be contagious. Zeftal felt something he had not experienced in centuries of conquest: uncertainty. The human minds were not behaving according to any pattern his species had encountered. Instead of becoming more organized under psychic pressure, they were becoming more chaotic. Instead of surrendering their individuality, they were amplifying it. On Earth's surface, Sarah Chun was coordinating the largest psychological warfare operation in human history. The static network had spent 3 months planning what they called the final storm. Every member of the resistance would participate simultaneously, creating a globe-spanning wave of mental chaos designed to crash the entire Zephyrian control network. Remember, Sarah broadcast to cell leaders around the world. This is not about thinking random thoughts. This is about thinking impossible thoughts together. We are going to show them something their minds cannot process. The operation had 3 phases, each more ambitious than the last. Phase 1 began at exactly noon Greenwich Mean Time, when every static network member started the collaborative paradox exercise. In New York, a group of artists began imagining a painting that painted itself while being painted by someone else. In Tokyo, software engineers visualized code that wrote code that rewrote the code that was writing it. In London, musicians composed symphonies where every note was simultaneously the first note, the last note, and every note in between. The psychic interference was immediate and global. Crystal towers from Antarctica to Alaska began fluctuating as their processing systems struggled with the recursive impossibilities flooding their networks. But the Zephyrians adapted quickly, rooting around the damaged nodes and reinforcing their remaining systems. Phase 2 launched an hour later. This time, the static network members did not just think about impossible things. They began thinking about impossible emotions, impossible memories, and impossible sensations that could not exist in any rational universe. A teacher in Snow Hollow remembered being born as an adult while simultaneously being a child who had never been born. A mechanic in Cairo felt the emotion that came after happiness and before sadness, but was neither happy nor sad nor anything that could be named. A student in Mumbai experienced the sensation of touching music while hearing colors that tasted like mathematics. The effect on the Zephyrian network was catastrophic. The aliens' minds were designed to process logical thoughts and organized emotions. When faced with human experiences that violated the basic structure of consciousness itself, their psychic receivers began shutting down in self-defense. But the most devastating attack was still to come. Phase 3 was something that had never been attempted before. A planetary-scale shared hallucination involving every member of the human species. Tommy Rodriguez, now 9 years old and the unofficial guide to Zephyrian psychic architecture, had discovered something remarkable. The alien control network did not just monitor human thoughts. It was constantly trying to predict what humans would think next. using those predictions to stay one step ahead of resistance activities. But what if we all think the same impossible thing at exactly the same time? Tommy had asked during their final planning session. What if we surprise them with something so big and weird that their prediction systems break? The shared hallucination was simple in concept, but infinite in complexity. Every human being on Earth, whether part of the static network or not, would simultaneously imagine the same impossible scenario. Earth was not Earth, but a giant thought being thought by a cosmic mind that was itself inside the Earth. It was thinking about. The idea was transmitted through every available channel. Television broadcasts, radio waves, internet posts, and word of mouth carried the basic concept to every corner of the planet. People who had never heard of the static network suddenly found themselves participating in humanity's greatest collaborative artwork. At 6 p.m. GMT, 7 billion human minds began imagining the recursive reality loop that Tommy had designed. Even people still under partial psychic control found their thoughts drawn into the planetary hallucination. The image was so compelling, so beautifully absurd, that it infected every human consciousness it touched. The Zephyrian prediction systems, trained on thousands of conquered species, had no framework for processing a collective imagination event of this magnitude. When 7 billion minds suddenly shared the same impossible thought, the aliens' entire psychic infrastructure experienced what could only be described as a cognitive heart attack. Crystal ships began falling from the sky as their crews lost mental coordination. Communication hubs exploded in showers of rainbow light as their harmonic frequencies spiraled out of control. The vast network that connected the Zephyrian Empire across dozens of star systems crashed like a computer infected with the most beautiful virus ever created. On his flagship, Supreme Commander Zeftal felt his ordered mind fracturing as it tried to process the chaos emanating from the planet below. For the first time in his existence, he experienced something that was neither logical nor controllable. Pure wonder at the impossible creativity of the human species. "Withdraw all forces," he commanded, his crystalline voice shaking with something that might have been awe. "We cannot control minds that think like this. We cannot predict beings that imagine in recursive impossibilities. We cannot conquer chaos that collaborates." The Zephyrian fleet departed Earth 3 days later, leaving behind their crystal towers as monuments to humanity's strangest victory. As the last ships disappeared into hyperspace, humans around the world felt the psychic pressure lift from their minds like fog burning away in sunlight. Dr. Sarah Chun stood in the ruins of a crystal communication hub, watching children play in its rainbow-colored wreckage. The war was over, but something even more important had been born. Humanity had discovered that their greatest strength was not their technology or their weapons, but their magnificent ability to imagine the impossible. Together, the Zephyrians would never return to Earth. Word spread through their empire about the planet where minds thought in chaos that could not be controlled. Other species began asking questions about the nature of consciousness and creativity. The rigid order that had held the empire together for millennia began to crack as subject worlds learned that there were other ways to think. And on Earth, the static network evolved into something new, a global community dedicated to exploring the infinite possibilities of collaborative human imagination. They had won the war not by becoming more like their enemies, but by becoming more magnificently human than ever before. The aliens had won the first battle, but humans had won the war of minds by refusing to let their minds be conquered at all.